Greetings, innovators and leaders. This is AI for the C-Suite, your compass for navigating the exponential age. I'm Chad Harvey, and we're here to bring you cutting-edge insights on AI tailored specifically for middle-market organizations. Buckle up as we embark on a journey through the transformative world of artificial intelligence. Today, I am delighted to welcome David Ebner, President and founder of Content Workshop, a story-first content marketing agency operating at the intersection of creativity and artificial intelligence. David brings a unique perspective to the AI conversation. He's not a technologist by training, but rather a storyteller who spent over a decade building Content Workshop into an agency that's produced more than 30,000 content assets for B2B tech brands across North America. While in graduate school, David assembled a collective of storytellers whose sole purpose was to use their skills to help brands create and convert an audience. That idea became Content Workshop in 2013. After graduating from the University of Tampa with an MFA in creative writing, he authored the Amazon bestseller Kingmakers, a content marketing story. In 2025, Content Workshop acquired Lush Concepts, a web and technology studio, to heighten storytelling through every aspect of a brand's digital and physical footprint. Today, David runs Content Workshop and Lush Concepts from their headquarters in Clearwater, Florida. He also serves as the treasurer for a national nonprofit and roasts his own coffee. What makes David's journey particularly relevant for our audience is his honest grappling with what AI means for creative work. After 6 years of formal storytelling education, he's had to navigate what he calls an identity crisis as generative AI has transformed his industry. More on that shortly. But rather than resist the change, David and his team have pioneered what they call a human-led and machine-fed approach, finding the precise balance between human creativity and machine optimization. Content Workshop has also been building custom AI agents for each of their clients, and they're now taking their proprietary creative processes and building their own AI tools to deploy quality content at scale. Their first agent is set to launch in December of 2025, and David has become a sought-after voice on how AI is reshaping brand storytelling. David, welcome to AI for the C-Suite.
Wow, what an introduction, Chad. Thank you so much.
Well, when I've got these liberal arts background folks that have MFAs and all these fancy liberal arts backgrounds that aren't technologists, we've got to tee them up. And I say that in jest, but anybody that is listening to our show knows that I am a big proponent of the liberal arts, and I think that it brings an awful lot to the era and the age that we're in here. So don't take my teasing too seriously there. All right, let's get right into that identity crisis that I teased in your intro, because I think that a lot of folks can really identify with that. And you had mentioned to me in our pre-recording call that you did, in fact, experience a little bit of an identity crisis over the last couple of years as AI entered the content creation space. And I think that is a feeling that a lot of mid-market leaders can relate to because they're feeling a similar disruption within their own domains. So maybe you could just take a moment as we start here and walk us through that journey. I would imagine there was anxiety and then acceptance. And what did you learn about leading through technological change here?
Yeah, it was almost like going through the stages of grief for my past life, right? At that point in time, I had to change. And I think that's what was hard to grapple. I remember distinctly, I was walking through my neighborhood. I like to go on these long walks in the morning. And I was listening to a podcast. I think Mark Cuban was on there talking about how his son was using AI to write his papers at school. I think his son's like in middle school or high school. And that was really the moment for me when I thought about people deploying these efforts to kind of replace some of the things that I studied for a very long time and spent a lot of money to study. They're replacing them within seconds. And that made me think a little bit about my value, what I bring to the table, and then the future of the company. It's not just me, it's other people's are putting food on the table for their family. So I have a lot of responsibility there. But what I've come to understand is that AI is a fantastic tool, right? It's an implement. And in the right hands and used the right way, it can produce amazing content, brand storytelling, anything. But it still needs to be wielded, right? like any tool or any weapon, somebody has to be a master of it to use it appropriately. And that's really where I've come to accept it, right? I tried to reject it for some times. I would, be curious. I would go on to use these tools, and I'm like, oh, write me an article about this, yada yada yada. And the result was terrible. I would never try to sell that to somebody as a result. So I would cast it aside and say, oh, AI sucks. Like it's never gonna. But it improves over time. Certainly, we've seen that. I mean, I think we're up to Chat GPT 5.0 or something like that now. And by the time this airs, it'll probably be 7.0.
83, yeah.
83. So I wanted to learn more about it. And when I started to really dive into kind of like the knowledge bases and the ways you can train these tools, that's what changed everything for me. You can teach it just like you can teach a junior employee of your company. And you can correct it when it does something wrong. And if you really understand which tools are best for which outcomes, you have a bevy of low cost, for the most part, tools at your disposal. There can be a little bit of anxiety of picking which ones for which tasks, and they're all updating all the time, and then you kind of like jump around. But if you really, what settled it for me is understanding its role in my processes at work. And really the best way to deploy AI I've found is to take a process that works well, a process that you've been doing manually, maybe using some other tools, whatever it is, literally write it out. And here's a great tool too. Go to AI and say, can you create a SOP for me for this task that I typically do, and feed it some information of what you typically do, and it'll break it down into steps. Then you can start to look at what are the parameters of success, right? Like what causes this SOP to deliver a successful end product, whatever it is. And then you start to look at the different steps and which steps AI can take off your plate, right? If you start to think of it that way, opposed to like, let's just go to it and blast it and have it do something for us, and think of it more of like an automation level or a thinking level to do some part of the task that you don't want to do or don't like to do. By no means should you replace the things that you enjoy doing. Like I don't have it write blogs for me because I like to write, but I'm not crazy about doing all the research that has to be done in which to have well-informed and references for the piece. So it can start at that process and bring me through. So as I start to develop these ideas and start to think of it that way, of it not being a replacement, but like an automation and thinking tool at different steps in the process, it's completely changed my viewpoint.
I am so happy that you went immediately to the issue of steps, right? You called it steps. Other folks might call it processes, because one of the pieces of pushback that I often hear from leaders that are anxiety kind of prone about AI, or maybe they're just suspicious about it, quite frankly, is there's, I think, a lack of meta understanding on their end about the process, about the steps. It's very easy for us to just look at something and say, creativity, mic drop, leadership, mic drop, right? And then we're not peeking under the hood and examining what are the steps that lead to the outputs or the results that we desire. And so from someone that is a creative, it's really refreshing for me to hear you talk about the steps in the process, because I think a lot of times it gets lost in the conversation.
Yeah, and that's how you create. I mean, we've been creating great content for 13, almost 14 years now. And it's been through trial and error of our company's called Content Workshop for a reason. We literally workshop everything as a team, and we find ways to improve, and it's constantly improving. So we built this awesome process for how to create great content. And we start to think of which steps that AI can do. That's literally the agents that we're building that you mentioned at the top are just, all we're doing is building a software package around the processes that we found to be successful for brain storytelling, and then allowing the user to decide where humans should be and where the AI can take over. And we're kind of packaging all of that together. So I think that's the only way to use it effectively that I've found, at least.
And I think that that is an excellent segue into the other issue that I teased in your intro, which is the idea or the philosophy that you developed called human-led and machine-fed. And for our listeners that are trying to figure out where AI fits in their organizations, break down what that actually means in practice for us.
Yeah, we still rely very much so on humans for the creative ideas. Now, we can prime those ideas. We can prime the conversation and even brainstorm with AI to give us some information. It's a thinking tool. It will think. What's a brainstorm other than a bunch of minds coming together and thinking in one place at one time? So it's fantastic at that. However, we still rely on humans to discern what is good and what is not. That's a subjective point of view, but every brand is subjective, 100%, right? There's no objective brand out there. So that's how we do it, and we rely on the humans to be creative. And the reason why that's so important is that there is no learned experiences by AI. AI is just feeding information. It's processing that information and feeding it, but it doesn't have a lens of experience. So it hasn't felt what it feels like to, surf a wave for the first time in Maui, or, hike that trail in Portugal, or whatever it is. Like, we've experienced things over our lives, and that shapes the lens of how we look at things. It certainly shapes on our empathy for other people. And empathy is the number one thing we do not want to erase from this process. And the only way to not erase that, empathy is a human feeling, period. Empathy is not something that a bot can have. It simply can't by definition. So we have to impose that and have influence over that on the things that we're creating. So we rely on humans for that. We like to think of it like a AI sandwich with humans being the bread, right? Like, we want to start with the creative endeavor and direction from a human. Let's let the AI do the parts that we want it to do and we don't want to do, whatever it is. And then let's end with a QA by humans. And then that shouldn't end the project. A great project always has some sort of debrief or looping function. We call this human in the loop, but like humans at the end doing QA, teaching it then how to do it better next time. That's a very important step that a lot of people skip. They just get frustrated and move on, but you have to keep teaching it as you go. So anyway, that's our philosophy.
I want to return to the QA piece of that in a moment, but you touched on something a minute ago that I think is a fascinating to me, at least, in terms of empathy and the idea of bots not having empathy. I completely agree. That said, I've had a lot of success with coaching conversations and other transcripts of asking the bot to analyze the level of EQ or the level of empathy that's displayed, because they're very good at pattern analysis. And I'm interested in your take on that and how that fits into what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a little bit of a delineation between being able to analyze empathy and being able to project empathy, right? And I think that's really it. And I agree 100%, Chad. Like, the best use case for AI I've found so far is data analysis. The best use case. Massive amounts of data, giving me a summary and overview, picking out the things it knows that I'm looking for, if I can feed it what I'm looking for. And it can do that on an emotional level. It can look for emotion and sentiment in pieces. So I think you're absolutely right. I just do think that those are probably, although still talking about the same topic, one's more analytical and one's, I guess, more emotional when it comes down to it.
I think that's a fair categorization. Yeah. So along that line, and kind of returning to where you left your last set of comments in terms of that analysis, I'm interested. Do you have a framework or a process that you use to determine where to draw that line between specific tasks that are great for humans versus, in your metaphor there, the human sandwich, right, with us being the bread? Do you have a process or a framework that you use to determine where that bread ends and where the meat begins?
Yeah, I love that. We actually, I'll add a caveat to that analogy, because sometimes we use an open face sandwich where the bread is just on the bottom, but the bread always has to be the last thing. Sometimes we'll do like what they call those hot browns or whatever they are, right? Where you just have the stuff on top. So what is
the sauce exactly then? Yeah, where's that come into play here?
I know, exactly. So we like to use different workflow mechanisms. The problem we see a lot of people noticing with AI is they try to build the whole workflow and everything in the individual AI system. Now, that's going to cause you problems if that AI system is not designed is not the best tool for that outcome. So if you build everything in that system, as that system changes or different things or updates, you're constantly having to move, right? So what we like to do is build our workflows externally. So we'll take a process that works. We kind of theorize where AI or other tools, there's plenty of automation tools out there. What do we need to integrate with? And then we build those in a secondary tool like NAN or another like workflow builder. And that allows us to find out what the triggering moment would be for a process to start. Sometimes a human will trigger it, right? Like, I need to do this, so let me make a form on a website or web page, let me fill it out, or anywhere in my Asana, whatever it may be, push it to to N8N, and then it will take the steps in the process that it needs to go and call whatever AI bot is the best one to call, then integrate, whatever other tool, whether it's like QuickBooks or HubSpot or whatever the tool is that you need for this mechanism. And then at different points, it can pull humans back into the loop. It can send an email or a notification to me on Slack saying, this thing's ready for you to review, respond to this message with a all good, and I'll take it to the next step, right? And then it can kind of go through that process for as many steps as you want to build. By doing it this way, and I know this is makes it a little bit more complicated. However, these tools are drag and drop. They're pretty easy to learn how to use. There's plenty of the other tools like N8N. You don't have to use them, but allows you to pull in whatever individual elements are best for that outcome of that task. And when things change, when there's another tool that's better, you just delete it, drop it in, right? So it allows you to kind of be agnostic to AI and be more about your flow and your process. So again, triggers can happen all along the way. Humans can be in the step wherever you want them to be. You have to figure out the process that works before you can do any of that. And then you can start to dissect it, I think, and deploy tools.
And I think that is an absolutely brilliant approach, because to your point, there are going to be components where the human is in the loop or is in part of that process. And I've started to really think about the intersection of AI and human workflows right now in terms of the old switchboard operator, right? They're plugging the wires in.
Yep.
And in your example right there, when you build that workflow in an external tool and you've got the components where humans are plugged in and where the AI tools or agents or whatever are plugged into different steps, then I think you've also got the ability to say at some point, okay, the technology has matured to the point where now we can pull the human out of that component, right? Because you've got that workflow outside of that tool or that system that's documented. And so what you're explaining makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think it's going to lead us as individuals who are operating any type of business size or working in a division of any business. We're just going to have to know more about AI over time. Like, we're going to have to stay in the loop, just like any other thing that's in our career. Like, we're going to have to stay up to date on the new tools that are out there that have been tested. You're going to probably want to Google alert, or you can use our new AI agent that's coming out to keep yourself alert on different advancements from Anthropic and Chat and OpenAI and Claude or whatever tools you want to know more about. It's unfortunate because the best way to use these tools is to kind of have to take a step back and get a little bit more technical than I think most people want to be. They want to just go straight to the tool and have it do it for them. And that could happen too. Long term, I mean, OpenAI, I think, just introduced their own workflows. You can build workflows inside of there. I haven't played with it that much. So I don't know how much you can tap other AIs to do part of the work. My guess is that might be limited. But trying to be, if you take a step back and try to be as agnostic as possible about the tool and just about the process, then you don't really have to be like an expert at all of them, which is anxiety ridden I think for most people. It's like, these are all changing. I don't know, like, what should I do? Where should I go? Take a step back, focus on your process, and then just drop in the tool of the time that is best for that step, I think.
I think that's excellent counsel. One of the things, even before the rise of AI, that I would counsel CEOs and leaders on was falling into that binary decision trap. And I think your comments there go directly to that concept, because we're bilateral organizations. We're hardwired left and right, black and white, right and wrong. And I think so many folks right now are afraid of making the quote wrong choice, right? We want to use the best tool, and it's not that simple. And if I could, I think part of this as well goes directly to the question of quality and efficiency, because that's a challenge that I'm hearing constantly from folks, right? We don't want to choose the wrong tool because we want to get the best result, right? The best result. But it's a tension between the promise of AI and the efficiencies that it can deliver, but the outcome a lot of folks often get is quite frankly mediocre, and they're not using tools right. They're not thinking about the processes right. So let me try and land on a question here. This tension between efficiency and mediocrity, you have clearly managed to reduce costs for your clients while maintaining quality. Can you speak a little bit more about how you've solved that paradox? I think you've talked about some of the pieces here, but let's tease this out a little bit further.
Yeah, quality is the bedrock of everything we do. I mean, we're a brand storytelling agency. The quality of the output is our reputation. So we have to, and we owe it to our clients who are paying us money to produce that high quality. So nothing can get in the way of that. But we need to be as open-minded as possible to new things and how things are advancing, right? So that's why that end of the sandwich is so important, right? That quality assurance mechanism at the end of whatever process is going. Just because a process doesn't produce the highest quality output doesn't mean that it didn't work. It just needs to be fine-tuned, right? Particularly from a quality point of view, a lot of people are saying, like data may be wrong, like it may be feeding you false data. The word choice, if you're going to use this public facing, you're like, I would never say that. Like those words are terrible to say. Okay. Those things are trainable in the system. You can go to the knowledge base with a lot of these things. If you're using OpenAI to create a custom GPT, right? You can create custom gems in Gemini. You can do this where you train it to say, hey, this is who I am. These are the things that are important to me. Here's my website. Learn about me a little bit. I like use these words, don't use these words, right? Use that. We actually are working on this like little short blurb to just share with the public. That's like, feed this to your chat GPT, your custom GPT to create just better sentences. Because there's just small things like it wants to make every sentence about the same size, length. It wants to use certain language levels that if you run a small business, a lot of the people who operate or have started those businesses were operators, right? They were the ones delivering the task, and they're like, I'm so good at this, I can sell this to other people. So their voice, their thought leadership is their product. So you can't have a tool like this be inauthentic because you will ruin your entire business, right? Not to scare everybody out there, but
no, I think that's a fantastic point.
Yeah, it's true. Like you can go through though and fine tune some of those elements and have people be the final check on that. And one thing we found very successful in a way that we continue to improve these tools is that we still do everything manual about 20% of the time. We purposefully spend extra money and time to do it manual at least 20% of the time. Some clients we cannot use AI to create content for them, period. If they're in a more advanced technological area that the data set essentially isn't up to date on, some areas like cybersecurity, very difficult to deploy AI. You can a little bit, but it's really tough. So you have to have human be able to do it manually well still. And I think that's where I worry a little bit. I have a little worry about the future is that there's so many agencies, companies that are deploying AI solutions to people, but weren't experts at doing the outcome before. So do they really understand what causes that outcome to be successful? And if you don't understand the steps that cause it to be successful, then you won't be able to look at it and say, this isn't good enough. Or how do I fix this? What part of the process failed? If you don't understand the process and the foundation, it's really hard to do that. So all that stuff is still important. What we do from a training mechanism is, particularly from a content point of view, we still create a ton of blogs, like tons and tons and tons of blogs, right? We'll have the tool every once in a while, usually every 20% of the time, we'll have the tool create an outcome based on all of the steps that we typically do and have AI do most of the work. Still human intervention, again, through a lot of the process, but then we'll do it the old-fashioned way too. And we won't tell the writer that they're going up against the AI. We give them the same creative brief, the same information. And almost always, the first draft from the writer is better than the first draft from the AI. Almost always. So we then feed in that information and we tell the AI, hey, by the way, this was a test. We gave this to a person. Their quality we think is a little bit higher. Can you look at these two things side by side, what you created and what the human created, and tell me what the difference is? It's very good at that. It's very good at finding differences between two sets of data. So it'll say, well, this one used language that's more like this, or this one used, commas this way and end dashes this way, or whatever it may be. And then we say, okay, we like that. Can you start doing that too? And they say, of course. So that human interjection, they call that, there's an acronym for it, and I can never remember what it is, but it's like human reinforced feedback loop or something like that. And that's very important in this process. And even if you're not doing something like that's content driven, that's another process, and it gives you a bad result, it's important for you to still do some of that manually and let it learn from it.
I'm fascinated by the the outputs that you're talking about in this process. And I know when we talked in our call before the call here, that you have a deep understanding about brand voice, and that many organizations out there don't. And what occurs to me here is, as you're talking about it's almost like a John Henry, steam engine. For those that remember that parable about the human going against the machine here. Only in this instance, the human is not only winning, but they're using the machine to improve the human's output. So a little bit different there. But the context here, and where I'm going with this, is you talked about how the AI wants to write a certain way with shorter sentences, with different types of parameters that maybe a human wouldn't necessarily apply. And I'm interested in the intersection there between what the AI is thinking, what the human is producing, and the brand voice of the organization, because I don't find that many organizations out there, and I think you agree with this, understand their own brand voice, especially in middle market land. When you get large organizations, more sophisticated, yeah, they've got that. But if a brand book exists, a brand voice probably doesn't for most middle market organizations. So you're likely encountering this quite a bit. How is AI exposing that gap? How's it potentially helping to solve it? Where do you interject the brand voice of an organization in the type of process that you just outlined? Feel free to answer any or all of those questions.
Yeah, well, it really does come down to how you've set up the knowledge base for your specific AI tool of choice. That's everything. The first thing we do when we build one for one of our clients is we still do the old-fashioned persona building, messaging workshops with them. We still do that by hand, that part, because we've got to get that part right. And all of that comes down to emotion. Your brand voice is 100% emotion. And if it's emotionally led, we usually let humans do it still. So that part of the process we do manually. And we have an end result that is essentially their target audience. We know their pain points. We know how they're feeling about their job, what they're looking to, solve. We understand the solution of the brand. We understand kind of how those two things come together to produce like amazing outcomes. And that is your voice. Your voice is essentially how you solve problems for your audience. So when you break it down that way, you can start to put together a data set or a sheet of information that will inform the AI of who your target audience is. That's pivotal, by the way, because it will know how to talk to specific audiences. And then how you differentiate as a brand when you talk to that audience. And when you feed that information in the knowledge set, it will have long-term positive effects on the outcomes that you get from that tool. Every once in a while, it'll go off track or use a phrase that you would never use. Then you can ask it, hey, can you just remember to, or add that to the knowledge base for next time? You can do that in the chat function with a lot of these tools, and it will remember that. The one thing you have to be very careful about with the knowledge base, though, is a lot of these tools have limits on how much information you can put in there. And even more so, how much information it will scan every time it produces the next result. So you want to keep that super concise. But what we found is it's actually good at making that stuff concise too. So we'll feed in the chat function, here's all the information about the brand that we've got. Can you sum this up into a X number of words thing that we can put in your knowledge base so that you will get the finite details right of this? Make sure you include, if there's some things that are definitely need to be included, highlight them, these items, do not skip over these or summarize these, use them verbatim, right? And that is a great way for it to consolidate all the information so it'll actually scan what it needs to know every time it produces a prompt. And then at the end, again, you have the QA with the human to catch anything that falls through the cracks.
I was furiously scribbling over here because you said something and I had to capture it verbatim so that I could ask you about this. I just thought it was fantastic. You said, so I'm quoting here, your voice is how you solve problems for your audience. And I think before the rise of AI, it was easier to get away with that inconsistent voice. But I think your insight there is, I'm not blowing smoke in your direction. It's brilliant because it goes to why so many organizations have so many problems in the customer realm, because they don't understand what business they're in. They don't understand their voice. And that inconsistent application is causing all kinds of ripple effects downstream. So I'm wondering, are you finding that more folks do have inconsistent voice still when they're coming to you? And how has AI compounded that? And how are you working through that even a little bit more deeply than what we just covered?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually the core tenet, or at least our belief of what brand storytelling is. Your brand story is not the founder's story. It is not your products that you bring to the market or your features of your products. I think a lot of people rely heavily on that. It's not those things. And again, enterprise brands, they don't just understand this, but they have the money to hire the people to tell them this, which which is why they get it. And mid-market and smaller businesses don't, because they just don't have the budget to have these conversations. But listen to this podcast and you'll get it, right? So your brand story is your audience, right? It is how you solve their problems uniquely, how you make their lives better. Even like it's not even their problems; it's how you make their life better. And just by a simple persona and message mapping exercise, you will get to that outcome. That will be your brand book, let's call it, or whatever it may be from a voice point of view, your brand voice. If you can figure out who you're targeting, who your audience is, your personas, the pain points that they have, the solution that you provide for that pain point. And I'm not talking products here, I'm talking solutions. And in fact, everybody should take this as a cue. Go to your website, instead of calling your products and your nav, call it solutions, because you're solving problems with them. It's very helpful. It's a whole mind shift for the whole company. Add your solution to that pain point. What is the outcome? Not just like, what is the outcome for them in their business, but what is the emotional outcome for them? Like if you save somebody time and save them money, it's going to give them a better quality of life, right? If you help them reach aspirational goals or even realize aspirational goals, it's going to help them have purpose and meaning. So if you can really dive down into that on a deep level, all of those outcomes are the beginning of your brand story. Your brand story is the hero's journey of your audience solving their problems and having a better life for it. So anyway, all of that information, if you can get that, nice and compact and put it into your knowledge base, you're 80% of the way there of the tool being way more effective for you.
Excellent. I want to hone in on the concept of solutions, and I'm going to use that as kind of a pivot point here for our next line of conversations. You are now building your own AI agents, right? You have decided that you need to provide some tools to give your clients different solutions. So you're not just using off-the-shelf AI tools, you're building your own based on your own proprietary creative processes. That is a significant leap. So what was it that made you decide that that was necessary? And what advice would you give to other middle market companies that are considering building their own custom solutions?
Well, the shift for us happened on a client side. For a long time, we thought we have a lot of clients. We work in a lot of different industries, but a large chunk of our clients now are in more technical industries, because content really has a huge effect when you have, if you have a educated target audience and a more technical, complex product, and that thing is sold for $1 million a year or whatever it is, that is like the perfect crosshair for fantastic thought leadership content, right? So we've got a lot of clients kind of in that space. And for a long time, these AI tools have not been developed for specifically these audiences, because they need to be more technical. They're not as accurate, and the companies aren't adopting them as much. So as a company, if we keep targeting that for our services, we're fine. Well, earlier this year, that changed. For some reason, all of a sudden, maybe not all of a sudden, maybe it's been teeing up, but a lot of our more technical brands came to us and said, hey, we have to start. We're being forced to deploy AI. There's this giant shift that's happening right now across the world, where executive teams are forcing their teams to deploy AI. Usually, sometimes they give them goals and outcomes they're looking for. A lot of times they just say, use it and tell me how it goes, which is way more the average. So that being the case for our clients, it means it's the case for us now, because our goal is not to put a bunch of logos on our site or talk about what we've done for people. It's to make our points of contact look like superstars at the companies they work at. So if that's important to them and they have to deploy it, then we have to do it too. And we have to help them achieve that goal. So that was a big shifting point for us. We've always known we wanted to create our own software, because we do, again, 14 years of a process that's worked really well and it's been honed. We feel like that should be shared. AI just allows us to accelerate the different steps of it. When we're building custom AI solutions and agents for clients, so we'll actually do an analysis for them. We'll do an assessment. We'll interview members of their team, understand their AI competency, for lack of a better word, and then we'll build a special curriculum for them to train their team how to deploy these tools. And then we build the tools too. That can be as simple as we'll build some workflows inside the tools of their choice, whether it's gems or custom GPTs, whatever it is, or we can build custom, what we're calling agents, where we build like the NAN workflows for them that touch multiple pieces and have an outcome. And then we train them on it. And then we're there to support them throughout the process. The end result is always storytelling. The end result is like, we need to use these tools to produce fantastic brand stories so that we can demonstrate our expertise to our target audience and help people. And if that's the goal, really the mechanism behind the scenes will change constantly. And that evolution to using AI is just the next step in that for us as a company. So that's kind of how we've bridged that gap.
Yeah. Was there anything surprising to you or anything that you learned either about the processes that you already had in place or about your own organization as you went through this?
I would say, and this is probably true for many organizations, we didn't have as many processes outlined as we needed. And we're a very process-driven organization. Again, we like to, as much as we're a creative group of people, we have our analytical people here too. We have a lot left brain, right brain coming together at our company. So we had a number of them on our core pieces of like deliverables for our clients, but like for internal processes for our company, basic SOPs. We didn't have that. And that was a lesson learned for sure, is that you have to have those. Like those are going to become more important as time goes on. Because even if you hire an agency like us to come in and build the first thing we're going to ask you is, what's your process? And if you don't have those built, we're going to have to spend the time building those. So I guess my advice, if there is some in that question, is start to spend the time. It's not wasted time. It's probably the best time you can spend as an entrepreneur, business owner, or even just heading up a division in a company. Write out your processes, the steps, and then star the things that you think make it actually successful. I think that's going to be, it's pivotal. Even if you do them all manually today, it's pivotal to have those. But if you have them well thought out, then you can also deploy AI there too.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We're talking a lot about creativity. We're talking a lot about AI. We're talking about the intersection between the two here. And we've touched on this a little bit already, but I want to go a little deeper and put a sharper point on this. I find that there's a common belief that AI can't truly be creative, that it's just predictive and therefore it's going to be derivative. But you're using it every day in creative work in different ways. So what is the truth here? And what have you seen in terms of the evolution of this technology? Can AI be creative, or is it something else entirely? Is it always going to be derivative?
Oof. I don't know the future, right? It is by design derivative. So, it's actually, I mean, it's way more intelligent than this, but like back in, I think 2008 or 9, Apple had predictive text in your texting on your phone, because it's based on what you usually use for the next word, right? Still does that today. Well, this kind of works like that. The data set is just the whole internet, and the next word is what is commonly found as the next word. Not beneficial for somebody who wants to who wants to stand out. As a brain, if you want to stand out, you don't want the next word. You want to zig when others are zagging. You want to, be bold and say new things. So that part is tough, right? So an untrained AI tool is going to be very, very derivative, very, very derivative. As you use a tool more and more and more, it's going to be derivative of itself. So that's just something to look out for too. I think they will get a little bit better at that, I imagine, but by design and mechanism of what they are, probably not much, because of how they're built and how they're trained. The way to make it not is the stuff that you put into it, the things that you add to the element. The creativity that you have as a human and as a brand is what's going to make what would be derivative content unique. So that's the huge part of the process. So when people are worried about their jobs or their futures being eliminated, some of that is going to happen, no question, but new things will propagate, right? As it always has over time. And those things will be, individuals will be the creative mind behind how to make these tools, bend these tools to our will, to our outcomes that we're looking for. So I don't think it's going to get immensely better on that front by design. However, I think there's going to be an evolution of tools that allow you to apply your knowledge base, what's unique about you, to then use the mechanism of these tools to produce things that are unique. opposed to a reply, only having the data set that they have, which is the whole internet, yet having the data set that you feed it that makes it unique.
I wanna go a little deeper on that. I think that is a fascinating topic, and so here's my question for you. Based on what you just said, you're leading me to believe that perhaps your definition of creativity has evolved since you started working with AI. I'm interested in knowing, how has it evolved, if it has, and if so, how?
I don't know if my definition has evolved. I think getting to a creative outcome may have evolved a little bit, kind of the process of being creative. Because I think creativity is just thought. Creativity is uniqueness. Creativity is abstraction. It's adding context to things that don't on its face have context. Now, how we get there, how we produce something that is creative, can be influenced by a myriad of things. Like our past experiences, like I mentioned before, allow us to have a unique perspective and lens on the world. That allows us to be creative. So all of that is just like little steps in the process that's leading to the outcome. So behind the scenes, how we develop creativity can be done with AI. The AI itself isn't the creative thing. We are the creative thing, bending the AI to our will to produce something that is creative. It is by nature creative because of your learned experiences being applied to it. So I think it's accelerated the ability to have brainstorming, which is a very important part of the creative process. Creativity without other people is just, it's in a silo, right? So you need other minds at work, and AI is a mind. It's not coming up with a lot of uniqueness, but it can prime, and it can evaluate, and it can compare. So if you're looking for inspiration, it can be the spark of inspiration, but it is not the inspiration itself. Traditionally, this is done a lot on the human level, whether it's with a group of people having a conversation. Just imagine like you're having a conversation at dinner one night, and the conversation leads to ideas and not just about people or things or places. Like and that usually happens. Like you're sitting around for a while. You start with like people, talking about yourself. There's a great comedian that says like shaking your own snow globe. Like you hear a story and you're like, oh, let me tell you my story that's like about that, right? Eventually, long enough or with deep friends, the conversation will go to ideas. Like, let's talk about ideas. That is the creative element of a conversation. And that's essentially something that AI can help spark and get you there faster. So anyway, that's, again, definition might not have changed, but I think the process in which to derive creativity, I think, has been augmented significantly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I never play gotcha on here, but sometimes these conversations do lead some very interesting places and some probing questions. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about how all this is changing the content landscape. So shifting gears slightly here, because I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a creative about this. So we know that the way content is being consumed is changing. We've got more succinct, kind of mobile first AI generated answers versus longer form content. There's a whole bunch of ramifications to all this. So it's a challenge, especially for companies that have spent a lot of time building up blogs and other longer form content. How do you think that AI is changing and will continue to change brand storytelling, both in the near term and the longer term?
Yeah, I think the things that have always been true will still be true. And then kind of like the things that have evolved over time will continue to evolve over time. And what I mean by that is people
That sounded very wishy-washy, David. No,
I know, right?
No, I'm just kidding.
No, absolutely. There's the foundational truths of brand storytelling have been true since people started telling stories, when we invented language, right? Which is building an emotional connection between the reader or viewer and the person telling the story or the brand telling the story. That's all you're trying to do. It's how stories have been told since the beginning of time. It's how stories will always be told. So if you focus in on that, the rest of it is just medium, is delivery, like how people are going to see it. How people are going to see it is going to change massively, right? And that already has changed. The core tenet, though, hasn't changed foundationally. So you may have built an entire content library on your site, and people may have used to come to that library via Google, or other search engines, and they're not coming as much as they used to. That doesn't mean that the value isn't there in the foundational work you did. In fact, the mere fact that you have that library gives you a leg up on people who will never have it now because they won't have built the foundation, which means that you can now use that library to train. You can now use that library to differentiate. You can now still use that library to attract humans to your site, which is still true. I think there's a lot of people who want to change the content on their website so it's more susceptible to bots. I think that's a terrible idea. I would not do that because the bots aren't the ones buying, right? The humans are. So create your website for humans. Figure out a way to configure the content on your site so that it can be seen by the bots. There's mechanisms in which to do this. I think Yoast is coming out with a solution. There's a bunch of tools out there that you can build kind of like a secondary page for every page that is designed to be only for bots. So bots show up on your site, they see this page, which might have more natural language in it, might structure things a little bit differently. It's just HTML sitting there. It's not visible. And then you have a site for humans, and the same page would look very different for your human decision maker that you've honed a message for and you've tried to provide some value to than the bot that's coming on your page. If you don't have the one for the human, you're going to start losing buyers, not just traffic. And honestly, bot traffic is so small to websites. Less than 1%. Less than 1% of queries on generative engines lead to somebody coming to a website because they're just getting the answer. Google is still sending 40% out. So don't give up on kind of the core tenet of helping people via content. It's going to be an important mechanism, but how they get to it will likely change quite a bit, I think.
That's a very interesting nuance on the whole generative engine optimization conversation. Yeah. I haven't heard anybody talk about building parallel tracks of content, one for the bots, one for the humans. So I think that's a very intriguing insight. And I guess the only pushback I would give is that we seem to be seeing a shift toward more of that summarization type content. And I've got to think that will continue. But to your point, the humans are at the end of the day the ones that are going to buy. So you got to have something left over for the meat sacks, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And I think you can do this easily right now with add a Q&A section to every single piece you produce. The Q&A is going to be more natural language. It's going to be common questions that would lead people to that piece to begin with. Nothing wrong with that. But you can still, the problem is there's a difference between information and education, right? AI overviews, AI search engines, things like that, they're very good at informing people. If you want to be educated and learn how to do something, if you want to learn how something works, it's not as good at that. That's educational content. And that is where you have to have that on your site. That's what the beef of your content should be. And then have a Q&A that's more informational on that same page if you want to attract both. You can do that right now without needing to build a second page on the site too.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Deskilling. This is a word I'm hearing more and more of. And I think that there's a relationship or an intersection when we talk about deskilling between AI and our ability to think strategically and think critically and just thinking in general. So kind of a compound question here. I'm interested. Do you see AI changing the way that your team thinks about problems? And then I also want to ask you about whether you think that a reliance on AI can lead to an atrophication. Is that a word? Atrophication? An atrophy
sure.
Of certain critical thinking skills. So first, from the team perspective and what you've seen, is it changing the way your team thinks about problems?
I don't think so, because the problems aren't the tactics. Usually the problems are defined by a strategic element, right? I have a problem. Don't go straight to solving. I think it was Einstein, or Einstein's attributed with this. If you were given an hour to solve a problem to save the world, I'd spend 59 minutes trying to, understand the problem and 1 minute solving it. That understanding happens on a strategic level, not a tactic level. And when we go straight to tactics to solve problems and don't understand strategically why they're happening or understand the problem that needs to be solved, we're missing a big chunk of the middle that won't allow us to solve that problem again in the future, because there'll be details that are different. So I think it doesn't on that level. However, how we inevitably act on that problem, yes. And I do believe this to your second question. Yes, atrophy is happening. There's no question about it. We've got people, especially younger generation, relying on AI to guide their life, not just business decisions, but like, what should I wear today, right? Like what, and that level of removal of like cognitive thinking about our day-to-day processes certainly will make us more reliant. Like, here's a great example, Chad. Like, you don't need to know any directions anymore, period. You don't need to know how to get anywhere. Google Maps will tell you how to get there, right? So we have lost the ability to understand how to get places. My son is 17. He uses, Google Maps to get to work every day where he works. I'm like, you've been working there for a year. He doesn't have to know that information. So we've lost the ability to retain that knowledge. And I think that's going to happen across the board for people who rely too heavily on it. I don't know what that leads to. I don't like it, but I live this life right here, that I'm in this body, David J. Ebner, and I can't control that for other people.
I can't help but think of the Office episode where Michael and Rainn Wilson's character in the car, and they're relying on the default nav, and they drive straight into a lake. And yeah, so I think there is an element of that. Do you think that there is a way for organizations to proactively guard against this atrophy of thinking skills? And I think a compound to that is I'm hearing a lot more conversation, especially in the service sector, professional service sector, I should say, accounting, legal, where there's a concern about the automation of the lower level work where the newer entry level employees would typically cut their teeth and gain the skills and the context and the perspective to be able to do higher level work. So with that kind of as the basis, do you think there's a way that we guard against this, and what does this all lead to here?
I mean, that's a fundamental strategic decision for the company, right? You have to value human thinking to take that route. I'm a little concerned about how much AI is being pushed down from the top on lower level positions for adoption, because essentially it could devalue that learning process that people have to climb the ladder at a company. And if that's the case, we'll never have junior employees, and that's going to lead to very poor outcomes for our companies at the cost of what? Short-term efficiency, gain, money, giving up long-term, longevity of a company for short-term gains sounds terrible. But I think people are doing it left and right now. And so I think, yes, if you value that process, if you value human thinking and you value the ability for somebody to understand a process, not just be able to execute on it, because that process may change next time or be a little bit different, or what if there's an outage, right? Like, and you can't solve any of your problems because the AI thing doesn't work today. You're in a lot of trouble as a business owner. So I think you should set guardrails for that. I think you should have junior employees that you train up. You might not need as many of them, but you have to have the ability to like replenish the senior team members. And senior team members usually get in that role because they're experts at the deliverability of the product or solving the problem. So they put them in leadership roles to train and essentially try to make more of them. Hey, you're really good at this. I want you to be a leader, and I want you to make me 4 more of you. So train these people that are doing it today to be as good as you were at it. So then it becomes a leadership job and not a production job. And that's a very different job. So if you have no ability to get to that stage because you never learned the foundation of the underpinnings, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And I think companies will realize that eventually when they have senior staff that doesn't know what they're doing. But long term, I think there'll be a shift toward continuing to have those lower level staff positions.
I appreciate you indulging me on that question. And as you're raising the issue of cost here, I think that it's very easy for us to translate that into a related area that is very near and dear to your heart, the cost of content, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you, in this era when AI is making content cheaper and cheaper to produce, how do you help leadership see that content's not just a cost, but a strategic growth asset, quite frankly, that is worth investing in?
I like to lean on the experience that these executives have had with content to prove its value. And it's easy to talk about how we consume content. Talk to them. Have a conversation about how do you spend your day? Like, what do you like to read? What do you spend time doing? How do you stay informed on the things that are important to you and to your business today? What do you do when you're just trying to kill time? And you start to lead to the fact that they're spending all that time consuming content. And it's valuable to them because they spend every day doing it. They read blogs, they read newsletters, they watch videos that have to do with their job. And sometimes they're just watching Netflix, right? Like, and that is content. That is content. It's it's entertaining. Sometimes it's educational, depending on what you're watching. So I think leaning on the fact that they consume content heavily and it's really important to their daily process makes it a no-brainer that their brand should be relevant in the same way to their target audience. We usually don't have to sell people on content, Chad. I mean, we used to a lot, actually. Then there was this transition where everybody knew that they had to have it. Now we're getting to the point where people don't value it as much because they think it can be cheaper. They still want to have it. They just want it cheaper. And that's going to be a supply and demand issue across the board. But quality will reign supreme. There's going to be this gap, this chasm that opens up between the brands that can afford to pay the money to have high quality content and those that can't. And they're going to rely very heavily on these tools. And that chasm is just going to grow larger and larger over time. Because I don't know if you can get out of this side of it without some sort of major event happening for your business. Maybe you can get over here, but it's tough. It's tough to build a high quality brand story with no budget.
I think you've dropped a lot of knowledge today, and I think the idea of that chasm between the low quality content and the organizations that can afford the higher quality content, and that chasm in your language, I think that's an important takeaway for folks that are listening here. We're getting close to the end of our time together. It always goes very quickly. I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't ask you about your first AI agent, which is launching in December of 25, right around the time this episode's dropping. So without giving away any trade secrets, can you share with us maybe the problem, to use our previous conversation, the problem that this is solving, and any other context you have around that?
Yeah, for sure. So for many content creators or small business owners or just thought leaders, there is a huge pain point, which is staying on top of what's happening in the industry that they're in, being informed, and then kind of like getting a quick take on what topics are worth pursuing as a brand in developing content. So our first tool is designed to solve that problem. Our first tool is called Chatter. Again, it'll launch in December. At least the
is
beta
that two
will launch
T's or two D's like me? Chatter.
Two T's. No, sorry, Chad.
Well.
Chatter. But essentially, it's designed to tell you what the chatter is out there about the things that you're interested in, the things that your audience is interested in. You feed in personas, their pain points. You feed in your solutions, and it will go find content. It indexes content across the internet to find articles, stories from news entities or industries or subreddits or LinkedIn, other places to show to you so you can be informed. Essentially, it aggregates all that content for you in the story format. And then it can automatically suggest which ones are aligned so much with your brand you really should move them to a topic and start developing content on it. Or you can manually do that. The other thing you can do is you can come in there and you just say, I had this crazy idea in the shower this morning for a piece of content. Can you go find me a bunch of stuff in your indexed file that matches this audience and these keywords and is like around this topic area? And it will go and find and do the research for you of what's been published recently on those topics. So it gives you reference material. That's the first agent. And that's the first part of it's ideation. It's the first part of any content that's developed that's good. It's got to be important to your target audience. It's got to match their pain points, solve something for them, and align with your brand. And that's what this first agent will do. And then the next agents will do the next parts of the process, which will be briefing, outlining, as well as then drafting. But those are coming downstream.
Very exciting. I appreciate you giving us a teaser of that. And I guess we'll kind of end and wrap up here because, again, we are getting close to time. As you reflect on our conversation today and the insights that you shared, which I really appreciate, and I think our audience is going to get a lot of value out of this, is there any one last or final piece of advice that you'd give to C-suite execs that are trying to leverage AI or thinking about leveraging AI in their organizations?
I think it'd be the same advice I would have given them before, but it has a little bit more relevance now, which is make decisions that are setting the company up for success 5 years from now. I think a lot in marketing specifically, we focus so much on short-term short-term goals and gains, and from a revenue point of view, from a cost point of view. But very seldomly are we creating something that's for the person that's not a decision maker yet, but is just kind of figuring out this realm in this area and needs to be informed. But maybe in 5 years. So that's where like creating really high quality content that's educational, even though your audience may already know this information by design of their job, they had to find out about it sooner or later. And if they find out about you, you're going to build a system for the future. Same is true with deploying AI in your company. Build something that is designed for the next 5 years, not for the next 5 days. That's my advice to entrepreneurs and business owners.
I think that is fantastic advice. And to use your phrase, find out about you, for our listeners that want to find out more about you, about Chatter, about your organization, what's the best way for them to get in touch and to do that?
Yeah, following me on or connecting with me on LinkedIn. I accept every connection request. Maybe I shouldn't, but I've got a lot of connections there. David J. Ebner, if you put the J in there, you'll see me pretty quickly. Or you can go to our website, contentworkshop.com. There's actually a little chat window there, and it's got my face on it. It comes directly to my phone. So anyway, those are two ways to connect with me personally. I have a slogan that my friendship is always free. So if you want to reach out and have a question or I can help you at all, please avail me of that request, because that's how I get joy out of what I do. So
I can't think of a more fantastic way to end this conversation than on that. My friendship is always free and it gives me joy. Wonderful. Thank you, David. That is fantastic. I really appreciated our conversation today, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chad.
And for our listeners, thank you for once again tuning into AI for the C-Suite, where we're committed to helping you thrive during the exponential age. If you found value in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on all the socials, and visit our site, aiforthecsuite.com. Join us next time as we continue to unlock the potential of AI for your organization. And until then, keep your algorithms running, your leadership evolving, and your AI in check. Take care, everybody.